Hi everyone. Today we're talking about one of my favorite subjects in writing, grammar. Now, I want to preface this by suggesting that people have a lot of pretty screwy ideas about grammar. They think it's a set of rules or it's a good way to judge intelligence. I'm here to tell you that those are wrong. Grammar is another tool that we have in our language toolkit, and if we're interested in how language affects the audience beyond simply what it says, then we're interested in grammar. Linguists tell us that grammar is a set of conventions that allow us to put words together in a series to form complete thoughts or lines of argument. The basic grammatic unit is the sentence. Each sentence is made up of words, and based on their order, the sentence represents an idea. For example, the dog chases the cat. We can probably picture a dog and a cat with a dog running in pursuit. Likewise, if we change the order, the idea that we see in our minds changes. The cat chases the dog. From there, we can expand our sentences to create increasingly complex ideas. Now, why does this all matter? We'll frequently have many decisions in terms of how we build our sentences, and the choice we make will have an effect on the reader. Knowing the choices and their effects makes us more conscious and effective language users. Language practices fall into patterns depending on the community, as we talked about with discourse, and the general term we might use to identify these is style when we're talking about the formal features of language. So each community has its style of using language. However, I'm going to caution us heavily from creating hierarchies between the styles. Before we go into sentences any further, we need to talk briefly about what makes up sentences. Words, which are parts of speech. This is probably review for most of you, but there are 9 parts of speech in English. First, nouns. These are persons, places, things, ideas. These are objects that exist in the world or in our minds. 2, pronouns. These stand in for nouns. Nice if we don't want to repeat names, but if there are many nouns, then pronouns can get confused. If you have 2 objects, for instance, make sure it is clear which it is it. Adjectives, these modify nouns, but too many adjectives can get burdensome. Verbs, these are the engines, and the verbs you choose will determine to a great extent how much energy your language has. Don't forget that to be is a verb. Adverbs, these modify verbs. These can amplify verbs, but using too many can dilute the reader's attention from the verb. Articles, these specify nouns and include a and the. Prepositions are spatial and temporal words that contextualize the idea in the sentence or the space in which the action takes place. Conjunctions, these are connector words that allow us to accumulate elements of the sentence. The conjunction you choose defines the relationship between the elements. And then finally, interjections. These are short exclamations that usually show up in informal or spoken language, the more than they do in formal written language. Hi is a good example. When we discuss the words that we use, we are in the domain of diction. There are a few things to consider. First, there are a lot of different styles of diction that tend to be put into hierarchies from high diction that uses a lot of fancy words to low diction that uses a lot of informal slang. I think these hierarchies are really problematic, but different social contexts do expect different styles or different registers. Likewise, a particular social entity, a person, can cause discomfort or intention by using a register that doesn't match their identity. This can be used in comedy, for instance. Anytime you see a program in which an old woman raps, the humor is generated by the style not matching the identity. It is unexpected that we would see an old woman rapping. Um, Now, we assemble these words. As we assemble these words, we build sentences. And the basic sentence type in English is a subject, followed by a verb, followed by an object, or SVO. Dylan drank the coffee is an example. The simple sentence is so common in English that our brains are extremely good at parsing it. When we read, as we pull ideas out of each sentence, we begin by looking for an actor, the subject, then we move on to find the action that actor did, the verb, and then finally we look for extra information like the context in which the action occurred, the direct object, or the recipient of the action, which is the direct object. Passive voice flips this order on its head and allows us to lose the subject. Dylan stole my coffee becomes my coffee was stolen by Dylan, or even just my coffee was stolen. Passive voice is harder to parse, but it can intentionally hide agency, and that's one of the reasons why it is common in sciences. The next type of sentence to look at are compound sentences. Compound sentences are sentences that contain more than one independent clause. An independent clause is a complete sentence that can stand on its own and usually includes a subject, a verb, and usually an object. They can be joined with a comma or coordinating and a comma and coordinating conjunction, in which case the idea formed in the sentence is really the relationship between the clauses defined by the coordinating conjunction. They can also be joined with a semicolon. Compound sentences allow us to establish larger relationships between ideas and more complex thought. That said, they are more difficult to read, and therefore the reader's pace will slow down if they encounter a long sequence of long compound sentences. The next type of multiple clause sentence is a complex sentence. Now, complex sentences are sentences that contain one independent clause and one or more dependent clauses. A dependent clause is a clause that contains a subject, a verb, and perhaps an object, but it has been subjugated under the main clause of the sentence. An example might be, while I am bored out of my mind watching Dylan's lecture videos, I find them chocked full of tasty information. The first clause becomes dependent due to the word while, which demands more information. It says, while what? Finally, there are compound complex sentences. These sentences have one or more dependent clauses and more than one independent clause. They are challenging to read because they must hold a lot of information. We must hold a lot of information in our minds at once. The importance for understanding sentence length is that long sentences are usually more difficult to read than short sentences. The closer we get to a string of independent clauses, the faster the reading pace will become. You might want to intentionally slow a reader down with more complex sentences. And as we start building increasing complex sentences, we start adding information in 3 different places within the sentence, or maybe all of them at the same time. The first place we can add information is to the left. Left branching sentences add phrases and clauses to the beginning of the sentence, and they preload a bunch of information for the reader before they get to the main idea. This is good if you have a lot of background information that you need to present first, or if you want to soften the blow. Right branching sentences add phrases and clauses to the end of the sentence. They generally follow up the main idea of the sentence with extra and complicating information. Finally, there are middle branching sentences which have phrases and clauses in the middle of the sentence. These are stylistically valuable, but they do interrupt the flow of ideas, so can be distracting. Right branching sentences are the easiest to read generally, followed by left branching sentences, followed by middle branching sentences, depending, of course, on the size of the branch and how many phrases and clauses are embedded. Now, what are our takeaways? First, consider during revision what the effect is of the writing that you're doing. Second, align the sentence structure to fit the purpose. Note that you can always mix up lengths of sentences within one text. You don't have to have all long or all short sentences. Usually a mix is the best. There are many ways to present any given information, and how you do that is really what this lesson is about and what you should be thinking about. Now, once again, your audience's reading pace depends upon the length of sentences and their complexity. Short, simple sentences increase reading speed, and long, complex sentences slow things down. You can use this in your own world of work as you consider how you want to control the flow for your reader. Do you want them to be able to read what you've written quickly, or do you want them to take their time? You can affect this by how you construct your sentences. So I hope that you enjoyed the lecture for this week, and feel free to comment below any thoughts you have, um, and have a wonderful week.